This week on the podcast, you're most probably paying yourself in dividends, so make sure that you stay on the right side of the law. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6 and 7 figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancott, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. Now, usually, Claire, we record these podcasts on a Sunday, don't we?
We do.
We do. So today we're recording them on a Friday afternoon. Why are we recording them on a Friday afternoon? Do you know? I've got an idea.
Well, 2 reasons. Firstly, I've just been out for lunch, so I look okay. I've got nice clothes on, my jogging bottoms, and I've got a face of makeup on. And secondly, we are going out on Saturday night, and I expect we might be a little bit hungover on Sunday. So I thought those 2 reasons why. Let's do it now.
That second one's a really good reason. I totally forgot we're going out. I was going to say, I think it's because you've got a snazzy new jumper, which you nearly answered in the first one. You basically was like, I look really snazzy today. Whoa, I'm looking this good. Shall we just record a podcast today instead of on Sunday?
Yeah, putting proper clothes on and brushing my hair and putting makeup on.
Well, we've moved it away from the weekend, so you're getting the better part of us. It might be the end of the week, but better than a Sunday after a big night out and all the rest of it, isn't it? So, right, let's see what's on for this week's news story of the week. Yep. So this week, Claire, interesting story. The Bank of England's gold rush that's pushing up the price. So this is a story that's come out, which is really interesting, about a fairly large exodus of the gold reserves that sit under the Bank of England.
Yes.
So for people that don't know, and actually, I didn't really know this because we went to the Bank of England Museum recently, and actually we were told that the UK has given away all of its gold over history. Yeah. So we don't own any gold.
Not given away.
Well, whatever we've done to it. Sold. Yes, that's it. Well, obviously, I haven't given it away, but sold all of our gold over time. However, when you read the story, the UK Bank of England holds the second largest amount of gold in its vaults underneath there in the world. And obviously, 2 questions there. Who owns it if they don't own it? And why is it exiting them at a rate of knots at the moment? So that's the news story. So the answer to a few of those things is the gold is actually, in typical UK fashion, we talked about this the other week, we're very good at creating things, but what we like to do is store everyone else's wealth for them and give our own away, don't we? So
yeah, so they're owned by the big banks around the world, aren't they? Especially in the American
amazingly,
banks.
yeah. So we actually hold the gold for a lot of the big central banks. We then also hold gold for a lot of commercial enterprises. So, whether you're a large private investment fund or whether it's commercial or whatever it is, again, it's because it's very, very safe to store it at the Bank of England, so they'll store it there for them. But they've had about 2%. Well, he says it's 2%, but actually the stats here look a bit bigger. The governor says it's 2%. That has been shipped out of the Bank of England and moved mainly into America, into banks in New York. And this is a little bit concerning for them.
Well, it's courtesy of Donald Trump, isn't it? So Donald Trump has levied taxes on a lot of movement of metal, in particular, I think steel and aluminium. I think it's like 20% taxes on it. And generally the banks are a bit concerned, the American banks in particular are concerned that he will also extend those levies to gold, and therefore to avoid having to pay those taxes should they be implemented by Donald Trump, they're shipping their gold out now. So they're flying all of the gold back in dribs and drabs to America so that they don't have to pay any import taxes should Donald Trump introduce them, which is just, I find the concept of holding gold bizarre anyway, because of the world that we're living in. So much of our financial institutions are underpinned by a physical commodity, which I can't get my head around. And secondly, I find it bizarre that we then are flying it around the world. Like, just from a practical perspective, the process of trying to get a vehicle secure enough to collect the gold.
This is the insane thing about this.
Yeah.
This is their problem. Their problem is, like, actually trying to transport it. It's really heavy.
Yeah.
It's really dangerous and expensive. The security is insane.
I was reading as well, though, that because obviously the Bank of England is a very historical building, really the vaults are not even set up for this sort of mass movement style event. So even the logistics of getting it out of the vaults is difficult enough. They've got to find vehicles to transport it in a secure way so nobody knows about it, so they don't obviously get robbed. And then they've got to get it on an aeroplane. And I imagine, if you're filling an aeroplane with cargo, you can pretty much ram it full, but you can't do that if it's gold because it's so blooming heavy, isn't it? So,
well, I think what's interesting about this is, going back to what you said about you can't get your head around it. You know that I study this type of thing a lot. And what is worrying about this is that, when people start to, go for gold or go for property or go for any commodity that's got real true value, it's a sign of a demeaning lack of trust in our fiat currency system, isn't it? It's that worry that money that isn't money until the day that somebody says it isn't money, loses its value. And we've, people know that through history, everything's happened. Fiat currencies have gone from everything to zero. Governments have helped themselves to it. There are all sorts of ways you can manipulate a fake currency, so to speak, or a fiat currency. And I guess the rush to gold is all about people knowing that, it's a bit like, we're big believers in property. The reality is those bricks and mortar will always be there. They'll always have a value to somebody because they're someone's shelter, and gold will always have a value to it, and has had a value for many, many thousands of years. And it's part of this, what's going on with crypto at the moment. I mean, it's very, very young, but it's that something's only got a value until people decide that they don't value anymore.
Yeah.
And it's a very complex thing to get your head around, but because of the historic nature of gold, it literally is, it's the most trusted form of any sort of currency, isn't it?
It is, but I do think an event like this is interesting, this sort of mass movement of gold, because everything that you've just said about something being physical makes it very difficult to move. And one of the things that we generally value a lot in the world at the moment is movability and flexibility. And the fact that gold doesn't have that, how many people are now thinking, well, do you know what? I don't want to hold gold in a country because I can't move it to different countries. They want these international assets that are transferable, and something like shares are transferable across different countries and things like that. So I think it's just an interesting...
But we've seen in recent weeks, just talking about shares, we've seen with the whole... the 600 billion wiped off Nvidia, that shares in their own right can just disappear overnight. They're as dangerous and volatile as that. I mean, to turn your point on its head a little bit, though, isn't the level of friction that's involved with gold part of the admiration that people have for it? This is, a bit like, to turn like a framework you use, the Michael Porter's putting a moat around your business framework. The harder you make it, the more valuable something is. And is there an argument to say that the level of friction involved in moving gold around, holding gold, selling gold, all that kind of thing gives it true intrinsic value, and that's why people like it?
So what are you saying, Simon? Should we get on down to HM Samuel and stock up on 9-carat gold?
The problem is with gold is it's an amazing store of wealth. It has completely and utterly tracked inflation for going back thousands of years. So there is no doubt about its inflation hedge on it whatsoever, and it's an incredibly safe asset. What I don't like about gold, which I do like about properties, gold doesn't pay you an income.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
And that's the big difference. Whereas property you can both, and we know in business that without cash flow, it's a real problem. So I think that's the one thing about gold that makes it less attractive.
Yeah.
Just personally, some people love it. And this is why, I sound like a financial advisor. That's why you should have a diversified portfolio of stocks, shares, gold, bonds and property.
If you've got excess cash, I can see the lure of gold because of the reasons that you've just said. But if you are not somebody that has excess cash or has a very cheap way of raising cash, then gold is just not for you. So we're not going gold buying this weekend, are we? But
anyway, to wrap up the story, I just wanted to say, obviously it's 2% of what we're holding, but we don't hold all of America's gold. But if you look at actually what's gone into New York, this is interesting. So they were, pre the election, they currently held 550 tons of gold. They're now holding 1,100 tons. Wow. So the weight of gold has doubled since the US election.
Donald Trump.
That's the uncertainty, instability, whatever you want to call it, that whole situation.
But it's interesting, you think about basic supply and demand. Obviously, at the moment, gold prices are increasing in America because everybody's trying to get their hands on gold in anticipation that Donald Trump introduces these tariffs. But if he doesn't, then there's going to be a surplus of gold in America and a deficit in other countries.
Exactly.
So therefore, UK gold prices are going to increase.
Yes.
So actually...
But isn't this just companies
that... Is potentially now a good time to buy gold?
Isn't this just American companies getting their gold back in their own country, so they're not paying the tariffs to bring it back in post the decision?
But I think
it's just a return to bringing it back in-house.
A little bit like currency. You can move money around the world and exchange it into different currencies and make money and lose money, but still have the same amount of money at the end of it. It's quite a bizarre scenario, isn't it? But we should add that we are not financial advisors. We are not recommending any investments in gold or
just a couple of muppets on a podcast, aren't we?
So if you go and buy gold, you didn't hear it here on the podcast. We're not making any claims or giving any advice at all. It's just for input.
But go and check out the story. It's a fascinating story, and I think we're going to see more of this type of unusual movement movement of assets and various things in the next 4 years with Donald Trump in power. So it's going to be fascinating to watch how it all plays out. Right, Claire, let's move on to this week's deep dive. Well, we're going to be talking about dividends done right.
Were you just about to call me somebody else's name?
I think so. It's a problem. It's a problem having a wife called Claire and a business partner called Chris, is that you end up with this.
I'll let you off there. As long as it wasn't like Christine or something like that, sticking out another woman in your life.
To talking to those people the most. So, dividends done right, how to pay out without paying the price. What's this all about, Claire?
So this is a little bit of an old news story. I know this isn't news story of the week, but it will all hang together in a second. So there's a rather large construction company called ISG. And in, I think it's like 2001, they paid out an unlawful dividend. And I see this an awful lot with the customers that I work with and small businesses in particular. And I thought it was just a really interesting topic just to touch on what exactly is an unlawful dividend, how you can find yourself in a little bit of hot water and what you need to do if it happens to you.
Okay. So, what is an unlawful dividend, Claire?
So, what is an unlawful dividend? You're reading your notes there, Simon. Nice one.
No, it's just the obvious question to ask.
So,
because I don't know.
In order for a business to issue a dividend, there's two things essentially need to happen. Now, actually, dividend law is really complex and there's a lot of legislation about it, but the two main things are this. Your business must have the profits in it to distribute. So, you must have earnings greater than the dividend that you're trying to issue. Yeah. Okay, so you must have the retained earnings in your business.
This blows business owners' minds from an early stage, because the two things are divorced from cash in the bank and profit to enable a payout of dividends. And I know when people first become business owners, it takes them a long, long while of being constantly told why. Usually the other way around, they've got loads of profits to pay out dividends, but they've got no cash to pay it.
Yeah.
And they don't understand what. Well, I've got this problem. How do I pay myself? Or vice versa. So tell us about, how they should be looking at that.
Well, I only gave you the one thing that needs to happen just for a second. So you must have the retained earnings in the business. But then the other thing is that actually you legally have to do some paperwork for this. You legally have to have a board meeting. Even if you are the only director in your business, you legally have to have a board meeting.
Do you think loads of business owners, like 90% of them, are all sitting there like looking around at themselves thinking, what, a board meeting to pay themselves dividends?
If you're the sole director in your business, for example, you literally need to sit there 5 minutes and say, do I agree to give a dividend? Do I have appropriate profits to do this? Am I sure that my profits are appropriate? Yes, job done. That was my board meeting.
I know that. I wonder how many business owners know that.
You need to document it. And again, that's a really straightforward thing to do. And I guess we can put a free download in the show notes of a simple meeting minutes and dividend voucher just to simply record everything lawfully. And that's actually a legal requirement that you're doing that.
So who would audit that? And if they audited it and you didn't have it, what's the consequence?
So generally, any payment of a dividend that's deemed unlawful will be pursued by HMRC as earnings, i.e. salary. So you will be pursued for PAYE taxes, national insurance, employers' national insurance. Essentially, HMRC see any unlawful dividend as a payment of salary, and they expect to have the taxes associated with a salary payment, not a dividend payment.
Okay, so they reverse the way that they treat it and what they charge.
So whilst it's not one of the biggest areas that HMRC are auditing, when things come up with your business, generally HMRC is a bit more tied up now. Going back sort of 20 years, you would tend to have a VAT inspector and a corporation tax inspector and a payroll tax inspector, but they tend to be a lot more digital now, and they might focus on one thing, but they will have a much broader scope. And if they find something in VAT, they are more likely to dig into other areas and things like that as well.
So they're much more connected across the things now.
Obviously, everything's very digital.
They've not been
now.
Great at that in the past, have they?
No, they've not, but their systems are getting better. They've obviously got a lot more digital information. You file your account, all accounts are filed digitally now. That's a big change for HMRC, whereas previously they were like paper copies and things like that. So, it's a lot more tied up now and a lot easier for HMRC to say this doesn't all quite add up.
Okay. What next?
So, as a small business owner, how do you catch yourself out? Well, the biggest issue that happens with a lot of business owners is that they are taking, for tax reasons, i.e. like getting the most tax efficient way to extract money out of your business. Generally, they're taking a small salary every month, typically around about £1,000 at the moment. It'll obviously change post-April.
Up to the kind of tax barrier,
up to the
because you can now do that because they've raised the NI ban as well. So they used to say like take $9,000 or something up to the NI ban. Now they raised that, didn't they, to level with the income tax, didn't they?
Yeah, kind of.
But
then obviously it's all changing again in April. So we won't sort of talk about that because it's all changing.
It's just going to confuse people.
It completely changes what's going to happen and the best way to do it.
But the basic principle is that people, still the best way to take, maximising it is to take a small salary, whatever that is.
So most directors
advice on that.
Typically taking about £1,000 a month salary, and then they're topping it up with what they refer to as a dividend payment.
Yep.
Now, actually, on a monthly basis, that is not a dividend payment that's been made to you, because you're not having the board meeting, you're not making sure that you've got sufficient profits, and you're not issuing any dividend vouchers or anything like that.
Yep.
You're simply issuing a loan from the business to you.
Yeah.
And then what happens at year end is that when your accounts are prepared and you've got the right amount of profit, your accountant will say, you took £50,000 out of the business, let's issue a £50,000 dividend to cancel that loan down.
They kind of roll it all up and do a roll up. Is that legit?
Yeah.
Way to handle it?
You are allowed to
do that.
You are allowed to take a director's loan from your business. There are certain rules about what happens if that director's loan is outstanding at year end and it's more than £10,000 and things like that.
So it's all fine as long as it's all wrapped up at the year end accounting stage.
But the risk is, and I see this often with small businesses, is that something happens throughout the year. They've taken dividends, they've taken a loan throughout the year from the business.
Yeah.
They get to year end and their profit isn't sufficient to pay out the dividends. They need to cancel that loan down.
So they're not likely to have the money to put back in the business, but they have to readjust the way that money that they've taken is being calculated. I'm guessing you're going to tell me the way it has to be calculated then is through salary, through PAYE.
Yeah. So
are there other avenues?
There's two things you can do. There's essentially you can pay an additional amount of tax on it that when that loan is cleared down, it is recoverable from HMRC.
Right.
But that obviously has a big impact on your cash flow. Or the other option is to pay it a salary. Or the third option is to just simply repay the loan if that's an option for you.
Okay. My question will be, why would a business owner take more money on a monthly basis than they know they're making in profitability to pay their dividends if they know their numbers? I don't understand why they would do that.
Because they don't know their numbers.
They what?
They don't know their numbers.
They what?
I thought you were having me on then. They don't know their numbers, and especially this becomes...
Why don't they know their numbers on a monthly basis?
Because they don't have the right finance team in place. And this becomes especially pertinent when somebody has a bookkeeper that is generally keeping on top of finance admin, posting invoices, paying suppliers, that type of thing. And then their accountant takes care of year end. And there's this big disjoint between their monthly numbers and then the profit that's actually declared at year end, which is available for distribution. And that's the biggest issue, is that if you have an accountant that only comes in once a year and does this cleanup of everything that is beyond your bookkeeper's remit, then you're likely to end up with a potential headache at year end where you might have taken unlawful dividends, or potentially the other way around as well. You could have been taking way more dividends than you have been.
Yeah. So are you saying that of all the various business owners you meet, that the way I do it is more of an anomaly than the norm, as in at the end of each month I do a month end, I calculate exactly what my run rate is on corporation tax, exactly what my run rate is on VAT, I understand what section of my cash I need to kind of prepare to pay those bills, I work out what my profitability is, and I start to understand and know what I can pay myself in dividends. People don't work like that.
I think you've talked about two things there. You've talked about cash flow and profitability, and they're different things.
Okay.
And I think generally business owners think they've got money in the bank, and they do exactly what you've just said. They're like, okay, well, I might have 100k in the bank, but my VAT bill is 25k, so take 25k off and take off X amount, which I think is going to be my corporation tax bill. So therefore I'm left with this amount and I can pay that as dividends. But they could still get to the year end and not have the profit to pay out. Profit is different to cash flow.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's why you've got to have absolute clarity on your numbers on a monthly basis. Because you do not want to wait to year end to find out what your true profitability is, to therefore understand what you can pay as a dividend.
But I guess I do both sides of it, because I do know because I do the P&L and therefore I know what the profitability is.
I do your accounts, so yeah. So yes, you do know, and we make sure that you don't end up in negative dividends.
I've had a good trainer. I'm fairly self-sufficient these days, aren't I?
And do you know what? If you get to the year end and you've got potentially unlawful dividends that have been issued, and your accountant says to you, well, you can pay this additional tax bill now, which you can recoup at a later date when the unlawful dividends are, it's not really an unlawful dividend that's been paid, it's an overdrawn director's loan account. Yeah. To correct that, you can pay this tax bill, which is about 30% corporation tax bill, essentially is what happens, and then you can recoup that when that loan is cancelled down.
So when does it become an unlawful dividend if the accountant actually processes it as a dividend when the profits aren't there?
At the point, well, essentially it's unlawful at the point it's issued,
right.
But generally it's not really identified until the point that the accounts come to be filed.
Okay.
And it's generally accepted. I think there's the technicality and then there's the practical real world workings that most people, I think HMRC are fairly accepting that most businesses are run on the basis that that you might pay dividends, particularly small businesses pay dividends in this sort of staggered effect throughout the year, and then it's finalised in the year-end account, although technically that is not the correct way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess by the time they've spent an hour trying to answer the phone, they're not going to be knocking on your door very quickly checking you on this, but it's good to be on the right side of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you are paying dividends, it's a legal requirement to make sure that you've got the profits available in your business. It's not the profit for the current year.
Yeah.
It's the retained earnings in the business. So if you've made losses in prior years, then you have to deduct that from your current taxable profit. So it's the total retained earnings that you've made in the lifetime of the business, not just what you've made in this current year.
And would you, as best practice, report retained earnings to your clients on a monthly basis, or how, would you report that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's how it works. Forms part of your board packs.
In the balance sheet, you'd understand the cash that's available to withdraw from the business if you wanted to do it.
Fine.
So you must make sure that you've got the profits available. You must hold a board meeting, which simply is just to sit down to agree. There is no formal structure for a board meeting.
Could be a chat on the phone.
Exactly. I think people are a little bit nervous about a board meeting. It sounds very formal, but you're simply just saying, I'm having a meeting.
It just means you've considered it.
Yeah,
you've had a conversation, even if the conversation is with yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you just minute it.
And it's a legal duty of a director to understand and have knowledge of the financial performance of the business at all times. It's actually a legal responsibility. You know, as a director, we often get caught up in the running the business and running a good business, but it's a legal responsibility to be a director. You can be prosecuted, you can be fined.
Solvency is not an option, is it?
You can be struck off and not allowed to be a director moving forward if you don't uphold your director duty. So it's the basic things. Doesn't take a massive amount of time to do, but really just protects you and the longevity of your business. Because just imagine you make a mistake and HMRC say you're not allowed to be a director anymore. You know, the carnage that's going to cause you when it comes to running your business is just not worth it.
Great. Well, nice one, Claire. Thanks for opening my mind a little bit on dividends, and I hope everyone found that really useful. And let's find out if we've got something for people in Profit Cash Growth Extra. So, in this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra, as I go back to my iOS updates situation, you know, not many weeks ago we were talking about the iPhone updates. Yes, Claire?
I'm a little bit jealous of this one, actually, because I'm a Windows user. And when I saw this, I was like,
gutted, weren't you? Yeah, I knew. That's why I come running in and showed you, because I basically just wanted to wind you up, because I was thinking, you're going to love this.
Do you know what? The main reason why I will never move over to a Mac is because I am a keyboard user. So one of my biggest bugbears, if anybody ever comes for an interview or anything like that, I'll ask them how they copy and paste. If they right click and select copy and right click and select paste, they will not get a job in my business. It's Control-C, Control-V. One hand on the mouse, one hand on the keyboard.
I do that on a Mac.
At all times. It just it doesn't work.
It does. It works perfect.
No,
you just don't know. Like, trust me.
Don't you have to press 3 keys?
No. Macs do all the same things. It's just a different keys. Like, don't worry. Like, you don't have to panic here. Like, Mac users will tell you that they are just as good.
No.
You just have to get used to them because they operate in different ways, but they do.
Yeah.
They're just as efficient.
But what you've got to remember is
I've
got 20 years
right, we're going off on a
Windows
shut up,
Excel in particular, shortcuts and tricks and tips. Yeah. I'm never going to move to a Mac. I
understand why you
update,
wouldn't, because you're an accountant, and actually the Microsoft stuff and various does work better on a PC, and I agree with that. But iPhone mirroring.
Yeah.
So, updated my laptop with the newest iOS software, which is a MacBook, and they've got this new thing called iPhone mirroring. And it basically just means that I can have my phone screen on my laptop screen, and I can use my phone from the laptop screen, and I can drag and drop pictures, text messages, and all that kind of thing from my phone straight onto my computer. It's so seamless. It is insane. I'm just so you basically can just think about how many times you're doing things on your laptop and you pick up your phone to access something. to do something or look something up.
Just even like when you get those text message codes and things like that.
You don't have to pick up your phone anymore. Yeah. Your phone is on the laptop screen at the click of a button.
I bet there is an app I can get on Windows. Yeah, I mean, Windows has got a screen mirroring app, but it's not seamless. You can't use your apps and things like that properly.
This is the thing that I love about Apple. The difference is lots of people do technology and do things that talk to each other, but Apple's actual infrastructure, the architecture of the technology is just so good, isn't it? Like seamless the way everything works. And so if you haven't updated your MacBook in the past, I've been scared to update it sometimes because you do these updates and sometimes they have problems and they make things worse. But this one, I was very pleased to see the iPhone mirroring app turn up. So now I'm just that little bit more productive again. So thanks for joining us for this week's Profit Cash Growth podcast. As always, if you feel like you may have outgrown your current accountant, then please do get in touch with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth. She'll do a lovely free financial health check on your business just to get you going and give you a lovely report to see all of the different things that could help you professionalise your finance function. And we'll see you again next week.